So I have made it no secret that given the opportunity, I am always willing to help. So for example, a couple months ago when I was launching the free freelancer coaching program, I put it out there that if you are in a situation where beyond your circumstances, you're unable to afford the program, it's quite an investment, that I'd be willing to figure a way to make it work for you to contact me if it was based on circumstances way beyond your control. So, for example, if you grew up in a war torn country and you managed to find your way to be following me on YouTube, bettering yourself, and trying to create a better life for yourself, definitely going to find a way to make it work for you. And in this process, I got some emails and some contact. And one of the emails that was quite interesting, from a great woman, a great person, but one of the things really stood out to me. And in the email, she brought up being held accountable. And she said that for sure, you can agree, Dan, that the most important thing a coach can do is hold someone accountable. And I need someone holding me accountable so I can get my life together. And of course, what did I say to that? No. Nope. Not going to be me. Not in a million years is that going to be me. I have zero interest in holding you or anyone else accountable. Does that make me a bad coach? Isn't a coach someone who's supposed to hold you accountable? You know, have to-do lists and checklists and say, hey, did you follow all these goals? Being accountable based on being accountable to someone else is only going to get you so far in life. And I think a good coach is someone who's going to help you create that accountability in yourself so that you're not dependent on another person. Now, yes, this might be a bad business model. I'm sure it would work out a lot better financially if I made everyone dependent on me. But I think learning to be independent, to be driven by yourself and have that kind of internal accountability is really important. And I want to go through a few ways that you can start doing that here and just why it is so important. So unless you grew up in Southern California with some really hippie parents, most of us start life in a position of being held accountable. From being a kid to going to school, it's always based on these external accountabilities, right? You do your homework or your parents get mad or your teacher gets mad at, you behave a certain way, you follow these rules, you show up on time, not for you, but because there'll be a consequence. It's very old-fashioned carrot and the stick, right? It's external motivation. Do this or be punished. Do this and get rewarded, rather than doing something for intrinsic or internal motivation. Now, this can become a problem as people try to transition either from school or from a traditional job to being an entrepreneur, someone who is supposed to hold yourself accountable. And it's always better, I think, to be intrinsically motivated or be motivated by a mix of internal and external motivation. So yes, you might want that fancy car or to impress those girls or to buy that nice home, but you should also have some kind of internal motivation tied to your work and your cause. And that's going to give you the most well-rounded fuel to keep you going through the good times and the bad. So if you're trying to go through this transition, yes, having someone like a coach or an accountability partner can be a good way to bridge the gap and maybe help you get through some tough times, but it's not a sustainable way to operate. I cannot think of any really successful entrepreneurs I know that are still driven by an accountability partner. Now, with that said, we all use some level of accountability we set up through things like mastermind groups or just making commitments to people we know or to ourselves. What I have found is that being accountable or following through on your word, it's a bit like a muscle. The more you use it, the more you can rely on it and the stronger it is. So what I would suggest doing is start off by becoming accountable to yourself on small things. Make little commitments that you can do that you know you'll follow through on. An example I used on one of our group coaching calls the other day was around leaving the last piece of dessert. That last piece that's going to be the best. Make that your rule that you never eat the last piece. It's going to challenge you. It'll be a little hard, but you'll do it and you'll start to make your word mean something. And this is what's really important is your word needs to mean something to you. And that's how you start to build that self-accountability. And so with that, one is, like I said, building small things that you can say and then do, and then say and then do, and keep building that muscle till eventually you can use it for larger and larger commitments. But the other thing is to stop saying you're going to do things that you're not actually going to do. An example I'll give you is learning Czech. So I have lived here in Prague for about 2.5 years now. And when people ask me, are you learning Czech? I say, nope, I am not. Now, of course, this comes off as like some rude American who doesn't want to learn the local language, and I'm okay with that perception. But the truth is, when I first moved here, I started taking private Czech lessons. And then I went and traveled for a bit, and I forgot all the Czech. Then I took I took group classes every day for 2 weeks intensive. Then I went to Brazil, speaking kind of Spanish, trying to get by with their Portuguese. Came back, forgot all the Czech. I realized that the way I was approaching learning Czech was not going to work. And that probably to learn it, the best way for me would be to go off to some small town for 3 months and just do intensive work for 3 months where I would not be interrupted by another trip in another language. So I've committed to not learning Czech right now, where I just don't do it. And so when I do commit to learning it, my word will still mean something. Rather than what I might have done before, which is to say, yeah, I'm kind of learning, it's going okay, but not having that mean anything, right? You can apply the same logic to health, to routines, to eating well. If you're not going to eat healthy, just say you're not eating healthy and own that. And yes, it's not the best necessarily thing to do, but it's going to at least start building that muscle of your word meaning something, of it holding true, right? There's power in your words. Now, I am not saying there is no value in external accountability. There definitely is. I've written articles myself talking about different tools I've used. Particularly myself, I like public accountability. So making a big claim where if I don't do it, I'm going to be shamed and embarrassed, basically. I'll be held a liar, which is something I don't want to be publicly. So I definitely use these tools, and I'm not saying there's not a place for them. But what I am saying is if you base everything you're doing on being held accountable by someone else, you're going to be stuck in this cycle of dependency, and you're not going to have the true motivation that it takes to really accomplish a lot of great things. Whereas if you're motivated by more intrinsic stuff, by yourself, you're held accountable to yourself, you're going to have a lot more power there. And so keep this in mind that in general, being accountable to yourself and following through on the things you'll do becomes a habit and it becomes a muscle. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I do not claim to be in this place now, probably somewhere in the middle, but I remember at one point when I was starting as a copywriter and I was really dialed in, where if I said something, it would happen. Like I would get up at 6 a.m. and go run in the cold. It didn't matter. I had built this habit of my word meaning something over and over and over again, and it became really powerful. And then eventually I shattered that and it screwed me up. I had this whole power I built and then I let it fall apart, and then I've rebuilt it at different times and stuff. So it is habitual and it is based on basically building it up. And so if you're somewhere right now where your word means nothing, like you often flake out on plans maybe, you say you're going to do something and you don't, and you're not even upset that you didn't because you just expect not to follow through on your words. First off, come on, you can do better than that. Secondly, build it up gradually. Pick something small, like I mentioned the dessert example, or something like that, that you can just build up that accountability, that willpower, that follow through, and just more and more make your word mean something, and stop saying you're going to do things you're not going to do. I think it's much better to just say, I'm not going to do that, than say you are, but knowing in the back of your mind you're not going to, because that just erodes the power of your words, which can be really powerful if you use them the right way. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe here so that you receive plenty of new videos. I publish new ones Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every week of the year, and I'll catch you in another video.